In this tutorial, you're going to learn how to use LUTs, or LUTs. And this is a single image that looks like this, that contains color grading information, such as the colors of your scene, in the shadows, in the midtones, and the highlights, or the saturation and the contrast. And I'm going to show you how to create one, how to adjust it, how to save out that LUT image, so you can use it inside UE5. And we're also going to cover some downsides to using this method and what's the alternate method you could use. But this is a great way to adjust the visuals of your scene very quickly and make your environments look good. So let's get into it. The most important part is when you are doing color correction or color grading on your environment. This needs to be done pretty much at the end of your environment creation. So this means your environment needs to be completed and your lighting needs to be done. The color grading, the color correction is not going to fix bad lighting. So if your shadows are too dark or too bright, or if some of your lights are too bright and they're blowing things out, their intensity is too high, this color grading, color correction process will not fix that. So make sure your lighting is done before you apply the color grading to your scene. Now for this tutorial, I'm going to use the retro office environment and all of its props that comes with it. And these assets and props are available for you to download with the course, with the retro office course. It comes with 79 different static meshes, 27 modular pieces, and 52 props. And it'll allow you to create a retro office style environment. And you can get these assets with the retro office project tutorial course. So this is what I'm going to use to light. So I already have a room, a larger room, and a smaller room over here created. It's all detailed and the lighting is completed. And this is the default lighting, means that I have not applied any post-process, any color grading to the scene other than tweaked the exposure values within the post-process volume. So I'm going to use this room as an example. But since it's kind of the same lighting, I'll be also jumping back into that room. So the only thing that I have adjusted is under post-process volume. You need to have a post-process volume for us to use the LUT. So in order for you to have this post-process volume, under Place Actors panel, go to Visual Effects and drag this post-process volume right inside your scene. Now since I already have one, I'm just going to select it and I'm going to show you what I changed and what you need to change to get things started. So this post-process volume, I made this post-process volume unbound, means it's universal. So I don't have to be inside this volume for it to take effect. And also I changed under exposure, I enabled minimum and maximum EV100 values, and I changed both of them to 0. So we don't have any outer exposure correction taking place inside your scene. The default values have that outer light adjustment where things get brighter or darker depending where you are within the environment, and I just disabled that. And last, of course, the lighting in the scene is completed. Let me show you where the LUT property is first. So it's inside post-process volume, and if you scroll down under color grading, under miscellaneous, and you can search for LUT, but let me just scroll down real quick. Right here under miscellaneous, you'll see two properties, color grading LUT intensity and color grading LUT. And this is where we need to plug in an image that contains all the color grading, color correction adjustments within that image. Now, how do you create that image? Well, actually, there is a neutral LUT provided for us. And to get that neutral image, you need to navigate to this link. You can also search for UE4 or UE5 LUT in order to find this page, but I'll link it in the description of the video, as well as it's going to be included with a link in the blog post. And I will also provide that LUT image for you to download if you are on worldofleveldesign.com blog post and you are reading and watching it there. There'll be a link for you to either get it here or download it directly from me. So then you just scroll down and it's going to be right here, color neutral LUT. Actually, you need to scroll down a little further and you're going to see this note. And this is the LUT texture example. So what you need to do is right click on this link and choose Save Link As. And you can see here it's going to be RGB table 16:1 PNG. And this is how you need to download it and get this image. So let's go ahead and save it. And let's navigate into this folder. And here's the image. So then we're going to take this image and we're going to bring it into Photoshop. And you do need a photo editing software where you can make the adjustments in order to create a brand new LUT for us to use inside UE5. So in my case, I'm going to be using Photoshop. Now, before we open up this image in Photoshop, we also need to grab a screenshot of our environment so we can make the corrections to the image, to the screenshot image itself, because we need to see what this environment is going to look like in the end. So you can use a print screen, but I'm actually going to save out a high resolution screenshot. So find an area inside your environment, doesn't matter where, as long as you can see as much of the environment as possible. And I'm going to press F11 to make it larger. And I'm going to click on the very top left circle with 3 lines, and I'm going to go to high resolution screenshot. And I'm actually also going to press G to remove any editor icons. You don't need to do that, but I just want the screenshot as clean as possible. So I'm going to position my camera. This is good enough. And all I'm going to do is just take a screenshot as is from this view by hitting capture. When you click capture, a little window on the bottom right is going to pop up, and it will allow you to click a link, and it'll just open you right inside that folder where the screenshot is saved. So I'm going to click capture, and then I'm going to click this link on the bottom right. And screenshot is saved inside the project directory, and then inside saved screenshot Windows editor. And here's the screenshot. If you ever need to get to this very quickly and you did not click the link on the bottom right, again, you can navigate it manually, or just simply go to the Epic Games Launcher and choose your project, right click on that project, and then click on show in folder. It's going to navigate to that project directory and then go into saved screenshots Windows editor, and here's the screenshots, and they'll all be listed here. So now we take the screenshot and we need to open it in Photoshop. I'm just going to drag this image right into Photoshop, our screenshot, and here is where you make the adjustments. The important part is you need to use adjustment layers, and the way you do that is within the layers tab, come down here on the bottom, left click on this circle icon, kind of like half white, half black, the yin-yang symbol looking thing, to create a new adjustment layer. And you can use pretty much most of these to make adjustments. Some of the common ones you will use, and the ones I'm going to use, are levels, hue and saturation, or vibrance, color balance. But you can use curves if you are familiar and know how to use curves. Brightness and contrast, that's another one actually I'm going to use. So let's go ahead and start with that. I'm going to start with levels. So I'm going to create levels adjustment layer, and then in the properties, I'm just going to go ahead and begin to adjust. So all of these adjustments, this information will then be transferred over to an LUT, and then information is saved within that LUT file. And that's the one we bring into UE5, and our environment is going to look like exactly what we see here. And it's a good idea when you're making these adjustments within the screenshot and you have in different adjustment layers, just save this as a Photoshop file so you can always come back to it and readjust, or create a new adjustment layer and just do something extra to it. So it's a good way to save this, and you may need to come back to it. So I'm going to just open up a little bit of levels, just so we have a little bit more light within the environment. And let's do another adjustment layer, and in this case it's going to be color balance. Color balance is great because it allows you to inject some color into midtones, into shadows, and into highlights. So let's do shadows first. I'm going to inject a little bit of cyan, a little bit of coolness into those shadows. And let's do a little bit of magenta. Overall, I want this more of a warmer color, warmer feel adjustment color grading to this entire environment. Whenever you're doing shadows, it's going to kind of darken certain parts. So you can always come back to levels or even do an adjustment of brightness and contrast. Then let's do midtones adjustment. So in this case, I'm going to actually give it a bit more red and a bit more yellow so it's warmer. And let's do a little bit more magenta, not too much. And then let's go to highlights. And I'm also going to inject a little bit more warmth into them. And actually, in this case, I'm going to balance out and just add a bit more green, not magenta. So then when you make adjustments, you can actually hide the visibility of that layer and just see what you did. And let's come back maybe to levels and open up the midtones a little bit more, because it got a little darker when we did the shadows. Then let's make an adjustment for brightness and contrast, and give it a little bit more brighter. Not too much because I don't want to blow out those highlights, and add a bit more contrast. Or remove contrast. Let's actually remove contrast. And last, let's do vibrance. And vibrance gives you saturation control, so you can saturate it and then add more vibrance, making the image pop more. So here's before, here's after. Just a little bit. I don't want to go too far, too much. If you want to see what the entire thing has done, before and after, just hold on Alt and left click on the visibility icon for the original layer. This will hide everything else, all the adjustment layers, except for the one you're clicking on. And that way you can see before, very dull, very bland. And then when you see everything together, Now we have a bit more pop and a lot more warmth. And this is what our environment is going to look like when we have our LUT. So of course, this is an artistic choice that you're doing. So you essentially manipulate the adjustment layers to your liking, to your visuals of your environment, to how you would want your final environment to look like. All right, so now how do we get all this information into an LUT? Well, we need that neutral LUT image be brought into Photoshop. So I'm just simply going to take that RGB table 16:1 PNG we downloaded and saved and just open up in Photoshop. And here it is. So you have two options. And the easiest one is simply go back to your original image and grab all of the adjustment layers. So you can select the bottom one or the top one, then hold Shift and left click on the very top one or the bottom one, whichever one you selected first. And it will select everything in between. And then just left click, hold and drag over that neutral LUT image and drop all the adjustment layers onto it. So this is where you should see original LUT and then all adjustment layers on top. And now we need to save this as a new LUT, because you always want to have your neutral one in order to do this for as many LUTs as you want. So with all adjustments on top, just like on the image, let's go ahead and save this LUT. I'm going to go to File and I'm going to use Export, Export As. Control Shift Alt W is the shortcut key. And this will allow you to save as a PNG, and this is what you want. You want to save it as a PNG. If you don't see it, just use the drop down menu and choose PNG. We do not need transparency for this, so I'm going to disable it. The rest of the options are going to be a default. So we have the width, 56:16. That's the original image. So I haven't changed anything other than disable transparency and change it to PNG. Let's go ahead and export and save it inside any folder. So I already have a bunch that I was experimenting with. So I'm going to save this as a new version of the image. So I'll do LUT Retro Office Tutorial and save. All right, that's it. We saved it as a PNG file. So now we have our custom LUT that we need to bring into UE5. The other way you can save the LUT is not having to drag all of the adjustment layers onto that default one and then saving it. What you can do is, let me quickly just delete all the adjustment layers from this LUT. So this is just an additional method that I personally prefer. So once you have the original LUT open, simply left click, hold and drag onto your image and then place that LUT. Let me rename it really quick, LUT. So this is the default one, and place it below all the adjustment layers and above your image. So that way you'll see the LUT right here. And I'm just going to put it right here in the corner. So now we have all the adjustment layers are also being applied to the small LUT. And then in order to get the size down, in order so you can save that LUT from the image itself, just hold down Control, left click on the LUT. It will make a highlight selection, a marquee selection around it. Then go to Image, Crop. This is going to crop it down to 256:16, the default size. And then you can do Control, Alt, Shift, W to export as a PNG. Same properties, and just export and save it this way. So this is just an additional way to work with this default. So that way you have a couple of options that you can choose the one that you prefer to work with. So I'm not going to save it. It's just in this case, make sure you don't save over this. Just go ahead and undo. Hit Control D to remove that selection over the original LUT. And now you're back continuing to work on making your adjustments. Now let's bring in that LUT we saved, that PNG file, into UE5. You can go ahead and create a subfolder for LUTs if you want. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to simply right click inside this Retro Office folder, and it's going to be a new subfolder called LUT. So if you have a lot of these that you're going to want to swap out, maybe you have different post-process volumes that you want to integrate into your environment, it's a good way to organize your work. So let me go inside this LUT folder and then just simply left click and drag that LUT that you saved out, that PNG, into this folder. So I'm going to left click, drag, drop it. Here is the imported LUT. You need to open this up. Double click on it to open up the properties. And we need to change one property under texture group. Use the drop down menu. You can search for color, and it needs to be color lookup table. So this is the texture group that it needs to be set to. And then automatically MIP gen settings has been changed to no MIP maps. Very important. And then go ahead and click save. Now we can close this, and this LUT will now work. Go ahead, select your post-process volume and navigate to the LUT property. Let's go ahead and search for LUT. So here's what we need. Enable color grading LUT. And now we just need to drag and drop or use the drop down menu to search for this LUT and drop it right inside here. And as soon as you do, this LUT will take effect and your environment will look exactly how it did in Photoshop when you were color correcting. If you need to adjust the LUT's intensity without having to go back and adjust it in Photoshop, you have another property here, color grading LUT intensity. Enable it. 0 will be, of course, no LUT, and you can do increments of it. So for example, half the intensity, 0.5. Well, let's just go back up to 1. And you cannot go anything higher than 1. And that's it. That's how you create an LUT and apply it to your environment. Now let's go navigate into that other room. And here, again, it's going to continue to look exactly like it does in the other room. Since we have our post-process volume set to unbound, everything is going to get this LUT and color correct the environment for. Now I have a few more. I'm going to quickly bring them in and reset the settings. So I have 3. So I'm just going to bring in here and I'm just going to open all of these up. And for all these 3, I just want to show you the options. I kind of went through and I adjusted for other parts of the environment that don't have the exterior light, the directional light coming in. They're more for interiors with artificial lights. So I just want to show you a few examples. So let me quickly change all of these to color lookup table as a texture group. I'm going to save it. And let me fly into the other part of the environment. Again, we are receiving this from the same volume. So for the interior like this, I wanted to maybe make it more cooler. And I do have an LUT that I created using the exact same method. I grabbed the screenshot, brought it into Photoshop, made adjustment layers. So let me go ahead and grab it and drag it as our new LUT. So this one is interior 02. So it makes it a lot cooler. And I have one that has a bit more warmth, a little bit more that retro quality to it, which might look very interesting. And the other one, this is the other default one that we had, the one that I created, that was for this interior, a little brighter. Now, if you want to have multiple of these LUTs to blend between each other, then you need multiple post-process volumes. And then when you enter one volume, you essentially enter in that LUT, and then when you exit it and enter another volume, you have another LUT, and they'll blend between the two. So if you have an environment that has different parts to it, and you do want to have different LUTs applied for those parts, you do need to have another post-process volume close next to each other, so you can enter one to another. And you do need to disable unbound, because it's not going to be a universal one. You're simply going to be inside that volume. When you leave, LUTs no longer applies, and then you enter another post-process volume with another LUT. So you would disable infinite extent unbound for those post-process volumes if you are going to be using multiples. And actually we go more in depth for using that inside the course, the Retro Office Project course. And it's where we actually have multiple of these post-process volumes that we enter from one to another, from exterior lighting to artificial interior lighting, and there's a different look and feel to these 2 different parts of the environment. Now let me share a small little problem and a fix for if you're going to be using black and white, or you want to desaturate your image to black and white. So let's say you have an environment and you want to have an LUT that turns your environment into black and white. So there is an adjustment layer that you could use, black and white. So if you have this will work, but the stack of where this layer appears matters. So if the black and white adjustment layer is at the very top, and I'm going to save this image, this LUT, so let me go ahead and just use the second method that I showed you. Let me quickly crop it. And I'm going to save this as an LUT. Now, if I bring this into UE5, I'm just going to re-import it because I already brought this in when I was testing. So let me re-import. So you can see that it doesn't turn your image into what you saw in Photoshop. It turns it into red and black. So to fix this and actually have what you saw in Photoshop, you need to take the black and white layer and just bring it down below everything else. It cannot be at the very top of the stack. So I usually just move it down if I need to have a black and white LUT. And then if I go ahead and save this, let me go ahead and crop this and do a quick export and rewrite the existing file. And if I go ahead and re-import, now it will work. I don't know why this happens, but that's the solution if you're going to turn your LUT into black and white. Now, a very important part about post-process volumes and using LUTs within them, and that is that this process, this LUT creation process, should be used with caution. The reason for this is LUTs do not work for all types of monitor displays. So you may encounter inconsistencies between low dynamic range monitors and high dynamic range monitors. So if you are creating a game and you're going to be publishing this game and it's going to be played across multiple different monitor displays that you have no control over, and you don't know what people are using, then you're going to have some weird inconsistencies of color from one monitor to another, primarily LDR and HDR monitors. So this method is highly recommended only for getting the look and feel of your environment first, and then using the post-process color grading settings within post-process volume, which is the recommended method now. Or if it's a standalone environment, then you can use LUTs all you want, because you're just going to be grabbing a screenshot or you're creating a video fly through. So this is only for you, then LUTs are perfectly fine and I use them all the time. But if you're going to publish something for others to download and play, then LUTs are not recommended. And instead you use a different method, a different way of color grading, which is in post-process volume itself. And all you need to do is, let me disable this, and under color grading settings, let me disable this so we see everything. If you scroll down under color grading, you'll have very similar controls of contrast, saturation, color adjustments in midtones, highlights, and shadows right over here under color grading. You have temperature controls, so you can change the temperature of your environment right here, right through the post-process volume itself, so you don't need Photoshop for it. Then you have global settings for saturation, where you can adjust the saturation in the environment. You can adjust the colors. You can go into contrast, you can go into shadows, highlights, and midtones, and adjust each individual setting for this. So you can see I can go ahead and start making all these adjustments entirely in UE5 rather than having to rely on an external software to do this in. These will take a little bit of time to get used to in order to use them. But like I said, if you are publishing a game, then you should be using these. Or use the LUTs if it's just for you, or you want to prototype very quickly to get a look, the visual style down in Photoshop through an LUT, and then jump over and make all the corrections to match using this post-process volume system. And again, in the course, we go deeper into using the post-process volume and not using LUTs, but using this method right here straight in UE5. So if you're ready to pick up the course and learn a lot more about post-process volume, as well as get the 79 static meshes to create a retro office interior environment with, the course is now available for you to pick up, download, watch, and use the static mesh assets.